Okay, welcome again, everyone. And our next presenter, Adam, is presenting us private channels and teams, the how and when guide. Welcome, Adam, and thank you for presenting.
Thank you so much. Let me just see here. There we go. So yeah, let's kick this off. So welcome everyone, Canadian Cloud Summit. Been a great event so far. I hope you had a great time. Been watching a few sessions already, and it's really great content. And of course, welcome to my session, private channels in Teams, the how and when guide. Myself, my name is Adam Deltinger. I work as a senior IT consultant in Sweden, actually. Also a Microsoft MVP since 2019, working, I would say, mostly within collaboration and productivity, and especially Teams as well. Feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn or Twitter, or both, or none. It's your decision, right? So before we start off, I just want to take a few seconds to thank all the sponsors for this event, making this event possible. And of course, thanks to the organizers of this event. It's a really great job, actually. All right, so let's start off. So some learnings of these sessions are what private channels really are, right? What are they, and how are you supposed to use them, and when? We're going to talk a little bit about facts and limitations of private channels. As well as how you administer these from a user perspective. And we're also going to talk a little bit about security and compliance. We're not going to dig too deep into that. We don't have time for that, but we're going to touch the surface, what you need to think about here regarding security and compliance. And as well as IT administration. So how we can administer private channels from an IT administrator's perspective. All right. So, but we're going to actually take take a few steps back, actually. So before private channels were around. I mean, they have been around now for quite a while, right? They're not really new in that sense. But before private channels, let's go back and talk about how you did these workarounds when you didn't have this feature to use. So as you might know, all the members of the team in Microsoft Teams have access everywhere and to all the workloads within that team. They have read and write to all the files. They can access the conversations, apps, and so on, right? So what did you do here when you wanted to separate some from a permission perspective? You wanted some of these users not being able to access, for example, some files and conversations and so on. So what do you do? And this is actually something people still are doing, is that they create a new team. Okay, so think about from a perspective when we have this team and we want to collaborate with, maybe a vendor or something like that, right? So we created an internal team. That's a very common use case. You created an internal use team with all your internal users, and then you have this external team. It's the same. It's just a normal team, right? But in this external team, you invite vendors, and in there you have those non-sensitive public information that the external users can access, right? And in this internal team, we might have some sensitive information where we have discussions about the vendor and so on. We don't want the vendor to see, right? So and I see this being used actually today as well. And people were very eager, like we want a possibility to create this private space within a team where we can have sensitive information that the rest of the members of the team cannot access. And this is where private channels comes in, okay? So what is per definition a private channel? Okay, a private channel are a channel within a team with its own level of owners and members. And creating this private space I was talking about for a subset of users from the parent team. Okay, this is a very important point. First of all, users from the parent team. What do I mean by parent team? That basically means that the team where the channel lives. So where you create the channel within that team is called the parent team. Okay. And when we talk about creating a private space for a subset of users from the parent team, we take that whole sentence. What does that mean? That kind of means that you have to be a member in order to be a member of that private channel. Okay, we're going to dig a little bit into this going forward. So some use cases are, I mean, I obviously already mentioned a few here, but we kind of want to keep things internal within the team, in that sense that you have a team, but you might have some content you don't want all the members of that team to access. Okay, it might be sensitive content as well. Okay, and we don't want to kind of have that sprawl. We create new teams because we need that extra surface with these kind of, maybe it's not that many files, or so just some conversations and so on we want to have separate from all the members of the team. We don't really want to go and create a new team for that like we used to do. Okay, or we just really want to create some sort of private space and kind of have a manage our own kind of, you know, subset of this team, where we can kind of have apps, conversations, and files and so on, right? So for example, we can have, let's say we have a project team, right? And we might have a couple of project managers, and that's a really good idea to kind of have a private channel for the project managers, because they might discuss something that, you know, they don't want other project members to really see, or access files that they might not want them to access, and so on. We could look at the same kind of perspective from managers. We have an organizational team, for example. We have a marketing team, and we have some managers there that kind of want their own space, right? It makes sense. And then we can talk about kind of the use case I was talking about earlier, about when we'll have external users in a team, right? So we can kind of have an internal space in a team that guests of that team can't access because they're not a member of this private channel. There's a little bit you have to think about this, and it's coming up in the next slide here, right? So what we really want to do also, or I want to mention, is maybe you're thinking like, okay, but we have group chat. And that's a really great feature of Microsoft Teams. We can create group chat, and we can be a lot of members in a group chat, and we can share files in a group chat. We can even have apps and add them as a tab in a group chat as well. But I would say I don't recommend, if you kind of have, you know, if we were like 2, 3, 4 people just gonna quickly chat something that we don't want anyone else to see. Maybe I want to share a file or a couple of files, and it's kind of a short period of time for that, and then we can go on and like let that go. So there are some caveats with the group chat. And first of all, when we share files in the group chat, we utilize OneDrive as a storage, right? So what happens is, actually I share a file in group chat or in any one-to-one chat as well. That file will actually end up being in my OneDrive. It wasn't there even from the start. It will end up in my OneDrive and be shared to the participants of that chat, okay? And let's say we have a number of users in a group chat, a number of members of this group chat, and we all kind of share files with each other. It's the kind of, you can see it coming, kind of like I share a file and someone else share a file, and that it will be stored in different OneDrives, because it will be in the sharer's OneDrive, right? And I might just like drop out from the chat, I might leave the company, and suddenly the other ones in this group chat lose access to these files. So it's not a good and viable option in that case. And we have non-threaded conversations. Now, actually, we can use the reply. It's a fairly new feature, at least from the desktop client or web client, that we can reply on a certain message. But still, we don't have that threaded conversations that we have in a channel conversation, where we can actually go in and reply and kind of have these threaded conversations that we don't have in a one-to-one or a group chat. And of course, there are other limitations as well when it comes to apps and additional content as well in a chat. So when it's supposed to be a more permanent solution, when we kind of add up in terms of numbers in that group chat, I really prefer or recommend that you kind of, okay, we might need a team for this instead, for example, okay, or a private channel, right? So what you need to think about here, because I mentioned this, like, yeah, we don't have to create this internal team and external team in that sense, right? And we can just use a private channel. And if you're not a member of the channel, you can't access the content within this channel. So, but I also from the start mentioned that in order to be a member of a private channel, you need to be a member of this team the channel lives in, the parent team, right? So what does this mean? If you look on the left here, okay, let's say we add some external users here, and then we have a private channel. From the get-go, we need to invite them to this team, and that means that they will get access to all the kind of standard channels. There might not be anyone unless, but there will always be one, right? Because the general channel that will be automatically created when you create a team, you can't do anything about it, you can't remove it, and so on, right? So they will always have access to at least the general channel and all other standard channels as well, okay? And the thing is, you can't convert a channel, a standard channel, to a private channel or vice versa either. So you have to think about this, because you might want them to be a member of the private channel only, but you can't really do this, right? So you might already have sensitive content in the meetings channel, in the general channel, and so on. So you kind of have to think about this before you create the team, really, and saying, okay, the only kind of the space we have sensitive content and internal content is within the predefined private channels that we create from the start, and only post within those private channels. Then we can invite external people and they can access all the open channels, and that's fine, but they can't access the manager's channel in this case because it's private. And you can see that by that little padlock here as well. All right, so what this really means here is that what you can do here is, from the start, when you think about this, you can do this on the right side here. We kind of create channels with all private channels, of course, except the general channel. In that case, we can invite whomever, an external user, for example. They can access the general channel, right? But they don't have access to any other channel by default because all of them are private. Then we can decide, okay, we want to add them to this channel, for example, the manager channel or the meetings channel, and they can then access the content within that channel they're invited to, okay? So it can get a little bit messy. You have to think about this, since they have to be a member of the team, the parent team. It's not as easy as it seems. You can just create a private channel, add whomever into that channel, and so forth. There's a great kind of new type of channel coming out really soon, actually, that can actually do this. And I'll quickly mention it in the end of this session as well, so you kind of are up to date on what's happening within that field. All right. So moving on to some facts and limitation of these private channels. Hopefully, you kind of know what a private channel is theoretically, and kind of some use cases for this. But in terms of limitations, you can have a maximum of 30 private channels per team. Okay, and that adds to the kind of standard limit of standard channels. You can have 200 standard channels today. So then on top of that, you can have 30 private channels per team. So a total of 230 channels, right? And there are some limitations in regards to amount of members for private channels. And as you can see on the screen here, it's 250 members per private channel, okay? So a good thing about private channels here is that you don't, in some certain cases, you don't need to create a separate team in order to kind of have the functionality of kind of closing off some sort of content and conversations and access to files and so on, right? They are fairly easy to create and maintain as well. There are a few things you need to think about, both from a user perspective as well from an IT administrative perspective, that I will talk to you about soon as well. And another great thing is that unless you are actually a member or owner, right, you have the same kind of structure as a team. You have owners and members. If you're not a member or owner of a private channel, you won't even see it. You won't see it in your team's view, right? And that actually goes for team owners as well, unless they have specifically access to this private channel. But we will talk about this in a little bit to clarify this. And there are apps and connectors available, but they must be added to the parent team first in order to be utilized in the private channel. Okay. But then, as you can see, there are some limitations for private channels as well. For example, you can't schedule channel meetings. You can have meetings. You can do Meet Now. You can click the button. You can kind of create a link and invite people to that meeting, but you can't schedule a meeting. And we will have a look at that, but there will be some demos in the session as well coming up. And as I already mentioned, members of private channel must be members of the team. And of course, I mean, it's not really a limitation in that sense, but it's a caveat in that sense. It adds another level of owners and permissions, right? So you kind of have to think about that. If you want to simplify, you now have to have, like, for every private channel, there's owners and there's members, and those owners kind of decide who is going to be another owner or additional member and so forth. So you kind of have to think about that as well. Message extensions is not as of yet supported. What that is, I will actually show you in a bit. And some apps like Planner and Forms are not supported either, unfortunately. And that's a big ask. And the latest thing I heard about Microsoft is that they're working on it. But I mean, they have for a while, so I can't really say when it's coming. But they're saying they're working on it to actually have that integration with Planner to create the Planner tab in a channel, right? Many people love this, but you can't really. They're not accessible from within a private channel. Something actually you can do, it's a kind of a workaround, and it has some caveats as well, but what you can do is from another context, for example, if you don't have sensitive information in the Planner plan itself, if it's okay if any other members of this parent team happens to stumble upon this Planner plan, and that's okay, you can go to another channel, for example, the general channel, and create the Planner plan or the Planner from there, okay? Then actually take the URL for that Planner, go into the private channel, and add the website tab from the tab menu. When you the plus button there, you can click that, add a website tab, and in there paste that URL, and you will kind of have a more web-like experience, but you will actually be able to visualize this Planner now within the private channel and actually work with it and so on. It works pretty good. At least it, I would say it does not work from the web client of Teams, but if your users are utilizing the desktop version, you can do that. Unfortunately, it's not working in the web client though. But I know a few that kind of work this way and do this as a workaround when they're working with private channels. Just a little bit of tip there. We don't have email notifications. For example, the emails you get when you have missed channel conversations and so on. So if someone writes you when you're inactive in a private channel, you won't get those emails saying you had a missed activity. You won't get those either. And there are some additional governance and compliance considerations I will mention soon as well. And the last one here already mentioned. Unfortunately, it's a big ask as well, but you can't convert standard to private channels or the other way around either. So I mentioned this quickly actually before, that private channels are not visible to other non-channel members. So if you're not a member or an owner of this channel, you don't see it in your Teams view. Okay, on the left-hand side where you have all your teams and channels, you won't see it there. Okay. Team owners, you're an owner of this team that private channel lives in. You don't have that in your Teams view either if you're not an owner or a member of this private channel. You have some other possibilities to see the private channels that do exist in your team since you're an owner of it, and kind of see who is the owner of those private channels. But you, as a team owner, not member of a private channel, you can't access the content of that channel. You can't access the files or conversations and so on. Okay. All right. Some user administration here. So this is, of course, from within the team client. So first of all, there is a policy from the team's policy, and this is kind of from a tenant level, from a tenant perspective. You can, as an administrator, enable or disable. It's enabled by default, but you can go in and disable creation of private channels. Okay, you can do that. And on a team level, you as an owner of a team, I can decide if I want to allow members of my team to be able to create private channels within that team. Okay, obviously, if it's disabled on a tenant level, you can't, as an owner, say let's allow it, right? So it's like every other policy works. Like if it's allowed, you can kind of narrow it down and disable further down in the hierarchy, right? But if it's enabled on the tenant level, you can, as an owner, go in and say, yeah, but I don't really want my members to be able to create private channels, and you can decide that. So let's just quickly kind of get an overview how all this works before I get into a demonstration here. So let's say it's enabled on a tenant basis, and the team owner of this particular imaginative team now have it enabled as well for members to create private channels. So a user can go in, it's very easily, it's like creating a standard channel basically. They can go in and create this private channel. By default, that user becomes the channel owner. The creator of this private channel becomes an owner. The same kind of principle when you create a team. When you create a team, you will become the owner of that team. And as with a team as well, as a channel owner, I can add additional owners and or members to this private channel as well. Okay, but as an owner, I have some more have a little bit more permissions than a member of this channel. So I can edit some settings. I can manage apps and tabs as well. And remember, in order to add apps to a private channel, they kind of need to be added to the team, the parent team first. Okay, and a user can leave a private channel. But if I am a channel owner and I'm the last channel owner, I won't be able to do that. It will just, prompt me with a message saying, unfortunately, you have to promote someone else you have to add another owner before you can leave the channel. But what happens if I'm the last owner, I'm the last channel owner, and I, for example, leave the company? Then there's a kind of an automation going on here that what will happen is that a random member of this private channel will be automatically promoted to a channel owner. Okay, so we'll just take basically an owner of this channel and promote that to a member. So making sure that there's always a channel owner in that channel. Okay, all right, just let's go deep down into a little bit of demonstration here as well. So I'm actually gonna go do like this. I'm gonna open up my teams here, and I'm logged in now as a team owner of this Can Summit team over here, as you can see. And as you also can see, there are actually two private channels within this team, and you can see and kind of find them by looking for this little padlock here. So you can see here there are two private channels in my team. Okay. Let's go into the team settings, because I mentioned that there are some settings I can do as a team owner for my team. So I can click the three dots next to the team name, and I can do manage team, and I can go into settings. And under member permissions, I can see here, and I showed it on the slide as well, there are allow members to create private channels, and it's by default on. I can untick this if I do want to, and I make sure that none of the members within the team are able to create private channels. All right, so I can do that. What I can also see within here, I can go to the channels tab within the kind of team settings here, and I can look at all the channels that lives within my team. And I can see all the channels here, and I can see by type there are indeed two private channels, right? And as well, I can go in here and I can kind of manage these channels like normal channels as well, and add members to it and so on. We're going to look at a little bit more on that in a little bit here. But let me quickly actually switch over to another user that is just a member of this team. He's not a team owner or anything like that. But as a member, as we just saw, I can create private channels, right? So let's do that. So I just click on the three dots next to the team name. I click Add Channel. And let's say my private channel over there. And under privacy, I select private. All right. So now by clicking create here, now we create the private channel. It's as easy as that. All right. So as you can see now here, the little difference by creating a standard channel is that we can add members to this private channel. So in this case, I can just add Emma, for example. And in order to do this, these people I enter here must be a member of the team, otherwise they don't show up, okay? So as I mentioned many times already, they have to be a member of this team I'm in order to be added as a member of this private channel. So I can do this, I can click add, and from here, when I've added, I can say, do I want Emma to be a member or a channel owner, okay? Let's just add her as a member. All right, so I have this private channel over here. Let's go back to the team owner's perspective over here. All right, it looks the same, right? I can't see that there's a new channel here, right? Because I'm not a member of it. I didn't add it. The other owner is an owner of this because he just basically created this private channel, so he's automatically a channel owner. But I didn't add this user called admin, this user actually. So I can see it. Even though I'm a channel owner, I can see this channel. But remember here, when I went into the manage team, went over to the channels tab, let's refresh that one now. And let's see if this channel actually shows up in here. There you go. I can see it actually. I can see it here. I can see it existing. I can see it's a private channel. And if I go over here on the three dots on that top right over here, click here, I can actually also, let me see here, private space, my private channel, sorry, the wrong one. If I go over here, I can see that I can show the channel owners. So as a team owner, I can have some control, so I can see the private channels, even though I'm not a member of them, as well as see who is the channel owner. So in this case, I can see Adam Deltinger is the channel owner. That was the other user that created this channel. But I'm the team owner, right? It's on the top of these, like it's in the hierarchy, it's above these private channels that are created in my team, right? So I can actually, as a team owner, go in and say, wrong channel again. I can delete this channel. I can't access the content with it or anything like that unless I'm a member, but as a team owner, I can see that it exists. I can see who is the owner and I can delete it. As well, I can delete the team. And if I delete the team, all the private channels that exist within my team will be deleted as well, okay? All right, so let's just quickly jump into, I can actually go back here and I can go into a private channel. And you can see it looks like a standard channel almost. You don't have the schedule button over here. I can have a meet now, basically saying I can create a direct meeting over here if I want to, and then I get a link I can distribute if I want to, but I can't kind of like add it to my calendar or any others. I can invite people in that sense when you talk about scheduling a meeting, right? I can see up here also there's a little notification saying this is a private channel indeed. I have the files tab. It works kind of the same way in that sense. I can add apps here, but as I also mentioned, if you search for planner over here, I don't get it. Tasks, some search for, I mean, it's not there, as well as Forms, for example. Microsoft Forms is not available as an app either, okay? A little bit of sad, but if you're using the desktop version, you can think about, as I mentioned, the kind of little bit of workaround in regards to adding a planner tab in the private channel, okay? Let's go back to the post tab over here. I click new conversation. You can see it here when I mentioned in the beginning that there's a limitation in regards to channel message extensions, sorry. So I can't really add these here. So if we go back to a general channel, for example, and click new conversation, you see these are the message extensions. I can, add a forms conversation. I can add a poll in this chat if I do want to. I can utilize, for example, YouTube, the YouTube extension to kind of post a YouTube video. I can have, all of these different kinds of message extension that exist. There's a lot of them, okay? But unfortunately, I can't do that if I go into the private here. I can't really utilize these. I can just use the standard ones that are available, for example, for external chat, for example. There's also a message extension missing there in a sense. All right, so actually let's move on here and talk a little bit about, give me a second over here. I'm gonna switch over, there we go. All right, I'm gonna talk a little about security and compliance in regards to private channels. So as you might already know, there is, when we create a team, a SharePoint site is provisioned behind the scenes that is actually where the files within that team, that the files are actually stored in SharePoint, okay? Microsoft Teams doesn't have its own storage solution. It utilizes SharePoint when it comes to team files, okay? So you create a team, a SharePoint site will be created with the default document library, and within this library, the files are actually stored when you add a file to a team, for example. And if you actually go into SharePoint and add a file within this library, it will you can see it in Teams as well, okay? So what happens is that in this default library in SharePoint, for every channel within the team, a corresponding folder will be created in this default document library. So as you all know, when you create a team, this general channel will be provisioned for you, right? You can't do much about it yet again. So by default, also this general folder will be created in the root of this document library, okay? And then I go ahead and create a channel called channel 1, in this case, as you can see on the slide, and then I go create a channel called channel 2. And of course, those corresponding, I usually call them kind of channel folders in that sense, because these folders are connected in a way to these channels. So if I go into channel 1 in this library and add a file, that is what you see if you go into the channel 1 channel in Teams, click on the Files tab. You can see those files that do exist in this folder called channel 1, okay? That is normal for standard channel. Forget about all this when we talk about private channels because it works differently. So when we talk about private channels, as soon as you go in and create a private channel, it will actually create not a folder within that library. It will actually create a whole new team site, okay, with its own document library, okay? And within that document library, a folder will be created with the name of the private channel, okay? And within that folder, that is where the files of this private channels will be stored, okay? So it might be a little bit of confusing when you hear about this, but Microsoft kind of came up with this way in order to really secure and make it practically impossible for a team owner, for example, to actually access the files within the private channels. Okay, so a whole new kind of site collection. We don't use that terminology that much. We use kind of just the site. A whole new site with its own library will be provisioned, okay, for every private channel. Okay, so the URL of this private channel will be the team name dash the private channel name. And within that library, default library, there will be a folder with the name of the private channel. Okay, so a little bit more information about this here. So as I mentioned, a new site will be created. There is a kind of a special template here being provisioned. It kind of have a different template name than of the site that will be created when you create a team. Okay, when private channels was released, there were a lot of more restrictions to these kind of special template SharePoint sites, but actually today they're kind of not exactly the same, but you can do a lot. Before I knew that you couldn't kind of build this homepage where you could add web parts and so on. Now you can actually do this and work with these sites almost as the site you have for your team, okay, and the standard channels in that perspective. So team channel 1, team channel -1 is the template that will be created for every private channel. And actually, as you can see in this fine print down there, June 28th, 2021, last year, they changed this to the template called Team Channel -1. Before that, they were called Team Channel -0. Okay, so they changed the name of these private channels, these private channel sites that were all created. And a good thing to know is that, for example, when we go into, I will show you a little bit later on and talk about how you can kind of like visualize and get all the sites programmatically via PowerShell, for example. You kind of specify, show me all sites that have this special template. And then you kind of have to know that if we have private channels that was created prior to June 28th, 2021, you have to search for both of these templates. Okay. Something new, kind of, I would say fairly new, is now also that for a while you couldn't actually see these private sites in the SharePoint Admin Center. You can do that now. You can have them visualized and see them in the Admin Center. And I can quickly show you this as well soon. In regards to team classification, team sensitivity labels, you can add a sensitivity label to a team in order, for example, to rule the external sharing settings, if it should be or must be a private team and not a public team, for example. If you want to have kind of make sure that only managed devices and so on can access the content of this team and so on, you can use that. And those settings will be inherited from the parent team onto the private channel and the private channel site as well. They can be changed afterwards, although. Okay. All right. So moving on here. Moving on and continuing with the security and compliance here. So this whole new site will be created with a default library that's where the kind of the files for these private channels are stored, will be created when you create a private channel. I talked about this, but I mean, there are a channel from a Teams perspective. If you look at the Teams client, they are kind of a channel within that team, right? And they are also somehow connected, not on a SharePoint hierarchy basis because there are separate sites, but they are connected in some ways. Okay, so for example, we talked about it inherited the sensitivity label and classification, right? But it also, for example, if I go in and delete a team as a team owner, all the private channels will be deleted as well, right? So, I mean, from a team's perspective, it makes sense because all these channels live within this team. But if you think of it as from a SharePoint perspective, there are different sites, right? But there are a kind of this connection to it, so it makes sure to delete all these sites that belongs to private channels. And of course, if you restore a team, you can do that and keep all the content and all the workloads within 30 days. All of these sites will be recovered as well. All these kind of private channels and this corresponding SharePoint site will be recovered with them as well. All right. What happens if I go in and delete this team site that belongs to a private channel? And I mean, the private channel still exists in Teams. It will kind of figure this out and say, oh, wait a minute, you didn't delete the actual channel, so you shouldn't just delete this SharePoint site. So it will actually be recovered, right? So and that is something I'm going to further explain, like always use Teams from an administrative perspective when it comes to delete, create, and alter membership and so on. Because if you alter the owner and membership from a SharePoint perspective, I mean, they're kind of built around Microsoft 365 groups. So it kind of works similar way with owners and members, whether you're in Teams, adding or promoting owners and members, you can actually do this in SharePoint as well. But if you do this, it will actually, there will be a script reverting this. I think it is like I think within 4 hours and so on. And also Microsoft has made it really hard to actually go in and alter permissions from this SharePoint sites, because it's a certain set template, right? The team channel -1 and team channel -0 if it's earlier on. They've made a change now, I think, at the end of last year, that they actually removed the site permissions options from those special templates. Okay, so you can't go in there, but I know you can do it programmatically and so on. But if you mess with the owners, members, groups here from a SharePoint perspective, they will be reverted. So work with memberships from a Teams perspective from within Microsoft Teams, as I showed you. All right, so moving on here, just want to quickly mention another thing is like you might be synchronizing your files. Your Teams files, right? You can do that. It utilizes the OneDrive client, so you can go into a team, synchronize the channel and the channel files, and it will synchronize to your file explorer, for example, if you're using Windows. I mean, I know many people that actually are utilizing and actually synchronizing the whole library. By doing that, you kind of get all the channels. So if there are new channels added to a team, they will be synchronized automatically. With private channels, this is not possible. I mean, it's possible to synchronize private channels, but since they are actually separate sites with separate libraries, you have to, every time you're kind of you become a member or create a new private channel, so you're a member of it, so you can actually access this, of course, you have to, per channel, go in and click the sync button from the Files tab in order to synchronize those files as well. So they are disconnected from the other kind of the main Teams library in that sense. So if you create a new private channel and want to make sure you synchronize the files for that private channel, you have to specifically go into the private channel and files into the Files tab and click sync. All right. Quickly, we're going to go into a demo here. Let me just quickly open up this one over here. And let's go to, actually, I have this private channel over here. Let's go to the Files tab and click Opening SharePoint. So just kind of visualize what I just talked about here. And you can see here now that I have this library here. I have this whole site, and I can work with this, as I mentioned also. I can see here it's connected to a team. It's a Teams channel here. I can see this is actually belong to a private channel over here as well. If we click, if you look at the URL here, I can see it's all kind of the same /sites, the name of the team dash the name of the private channel. Just as I explained, this is the site name. It will have the parent team name dash the name of the private channel. And if I go into documents, the new default library for this private channel, there will be a folder with the name yet again of the private channel. And in here is where the files actually live, okay? And as you can see, it has some sort of, I said it's connected in some ways. You have also actually in this template have kind of a link to the parent team as well. So I can just click here and it will basically take me to the SharePoint site of the parent team. So I can do this, and you can see here, I'm in this Can Summit 22. If I go to documents over here, I have all these channels and the kind of standard channels in here, okay? And there are standard channels or just folder in this default team library, okay? All right, so just quickly here, I talked about synchronizing. I have to go into this private channel, go to files, and from here I can synchronize, okay? So think about that, because a lot of people, when they create, oh, I thought I synced all the folder, like synced all the channels, but that is not, that doesn't go for private channels in that sense. All right, let's quickly jump back to my slide over here. Excuse me, I did. I think there we go. All right, sorry about that. All right. When it comes to retention, there's a little bit that you have to think about when it comes to security and regarding security and compliance as well. Because if you added retention for files for Teams, right? You have to think about that when you do this, you can do this. and it will apply to all the team sites. Okay, or you can specify certain teams, or you can apply to all the teams within the organization. But by default, it won't include private channel team sites, and that's where the files lives, right? So if you just have a retention policy today applying to teams, there might be a possibility that you don't actually now include the private channel sites. So all the files in private channels are kind of outside this retention policy. Okay, so you kind of have to do this individually, and I'll show you here actually on the next slide over here. As you can see here, if you go in and start creating from the Compliance Center and create a retention policy, you can see that when you're applying a retention policy for team sites, you choose the option Microsoft 365 groups, because as I said, I didn't go too deeply into it, but I said like for every team, there's a Microsoft 365 group behind the scenes. So when you're applying retention on a team, you're choosing this option, Microsoft 365 groups. But then you go ahead and create private channels. Those won't be included in this policy. In order for them to be included in the policy, you have to also kind of put this little marker to on SharePoint sites. Okay, and when you do that, they will include private channel team sites as well. Okay, they are separate in terms of this retention policy. When it comes to retention of channel messages, there's also a separation there. Okay, for a while, private channels didn't support conversation retention and chat conversation, but it does now. But same principle kind of here, that as you can see here on the bottom image here, it says Teams channel messages. Might have turned that to on and think, yeah, we're good to go. We have this retention now for all our conversations. No, if there are private channel conversations, they're not included. So as you can see here, there's another tick box you have to enable in order to include private channel conversation. Okay, so you have to think about that. All right, when it comes to conversations, channel conversations in private channels versus standard channels, when you have conversations, all the conversations are copied to the group mailbox, which is also, when you create a team, provisioned behind the scenes. That will be provisioned there as well in this group box. And you can put this group box on hold, for example, or search for e-discovery or something like that. But with private channels, the conversations goes to the individual members of that private channel's personal mailbox. Okay, there's no group mailbox for a private channel. So something you have to think about regarding this, for example, to perform an e-discovery search against a private channel message, you need to include not the group mailbox here. You need to include at least one of the private channel members' personal mailbox here. Okay. So if you're going to put something on hold, you need to, or messages, private channel messages on hold, you need to do that from a member's personal mailbox perspective as well. Okay. And of course, also, I didn't mention this when it comes to retention policy, but you have to have separate retention policies to contain both standard and private channel messages policies. Okay. So you kind of have to create two of them. You can't have both enabled in one policy. You have to create another one, basically. All right. From Teams Admin Center or TAC, you can actually view, you can create and delete private channels. You can edit membership, and you can also edit, for example, the name from that perspective. When it comes to IT, furthermore, IT administration, you can work with the Grave API as well to kind of do the same. You can enable, disable private channel creation for members in a team. You can create actually a private channel on behalf of a team owner if you want to do that. You can list all the private channel messages and replies. You can list all the SharePoint URLs of a private channel as well. And here is when you do this, you add what template you're searching for. And yet again here, search for both team channel -0 and -1 if you utilize private channels prior to June 28th, 2021, right? And you can update lists and roles. And you can basically do the same with PowerShell as well. You can create lists, edit and delete private channels, add members, and also kind of promote to owners and demote and so on. All right. I think I had a quick demo of actually showing this, but I'm seeing here I'm running out of time. So I'm actually gonna skip this and just quickly take a minute and talk about shared channels. This is something you might have heard about it. I mentioned it in the beginning of this session when it we have these limitations of private channels when we can't add people from outside the team. They first have to be a member of the parent team, then they can be added to a private channel. There's something coming out in public preview hopefully in March next month. That's called shared channels, where you can actually share a whole channel or I would say you can share a channel. You create it from the start. It's the same principle. You have to create it as a shared channel. You can't convert or anything like that. You have to create. You have the option to create the shared channel, and then you can then share this channel to anyone, even outside of the team or even externally. Okay, and you can even add that channel to another team, so it will be visible among the channels of that team. And instead of, for example, inviting people as guests, external people as guests to a team, you can basically share channels and they don't have to switch tenant. It will be super great. There will be, I'm actually working on a session about shared channel as well. But there are some use cases when you might still want to use private channels, right? So for example, if you strictly want to enforce team membership and you want members to create channels, create private channels or these type of private channels, right? Because at least when in the public preview of shared channels, only team owners are able to create these shared channels. Okay, and you might also want to utilize B2B for guests, for example, because it utilizes something called B2B Connect instead. So if you're using B2B accounts, guest accounts in your Azure tenant and want to keep using that, you might still want to look into kind of going forward with private channels instead of shared channels. Okay. So as a quick summary here, to think about, decide if and who should be able to create private channels, create policies according to this in the team's admin center. As I mentioned, as a team owner, you can kind of decide this for your own team. Kind of define the use cases for the private channels is always a good thing to do that just before just rolling them out. Be aware of the limitations and plan for security and compliance. As I said, they work a bit differently behind the scenes than standard channels in numerous ways. And of course, as always, educate your users, train your users about all this, what they need to know and how to use them and why they need to use them or not. Oh, that's the end of this session. Thank you so much for listening. Of course, feedback, once again, the session code is on top of that QR code. You have a chance to win a $50 Amazon gift card. And of course, it's always a good thing for the organizers to receive feedback as well as for the speakers. So please take a second and do that. Just scan the QR code. And once again, thank you so much, again, all the sponsors and organizers of this event. Let's see, I'm thinking we're short of time, but let's see if there are any questions there in the chat.
Thank you, Adam. There was one question about the visibility of the private channels and the team's admin, and I just answered it for you. So that was the only question.
Okay, it's been answered already.
Oh, there's another one coming up now.
How to delete a private channel if it was created for a project that is completed and all required info is collected. I mean, yeah, you can. I mean, you can delete a private channel just as you can delete any other standard channel in that sense, and you also have the possibility to recover it if you're an owner of that channel or a team owner as well, actually. So, I mean, if you don't need a private channel no longer, it doesn't, differentiate between a standard and a private channel in that sense. You can delete it and so on. All right, so let's leave some time. I think the chat still works, so I can keep an eye of it. So we can leave over to the next speaker to prepare. Thanks so much yet again.
Thanks, Adam.